So, Senator Daniels, you had an interesting motion to adjourn today in respect of the views of sex offenders register. Would you like to expand on that?
Yes, the One Bermuda Alliance does actually support the establishment of a more open sex offenders register. Currently, and in fact since 1998, pursuant to the Children's Protection Act, there has been, it was actually an establishment of a child sex offenders register. Having said that, the Attorney General did not establish protocols for said register until 2009. Bermuda cannot actually have a very open sex offenders register as is, modelled after the US. Just because of our laws being modelled after UK laws, we can't actually have that. Having said that, back in 2008, the UK actually made an amendment to their legislation following the rape of a young child, and it now allows for individuals that might have a reasonable concern about a child being exposed to a potential sex offender to present their case to the police. The police will consider the same and can actually make the records of the offender available for the consideration of those that are duly concerned. So that was the first thing. I feel that Bermuda at the very least should consider following the current UK best practice and making a similar amendment to our own register, because at the moment only childcare practitioners can actually make an appeal to the minister in consultation with the police to have information about potential sex offenders. And my understanding is that in fact no one has actually applied for that information. So the current register is really of no use, certainly not in terms of protecting victims or potential victims. So the second point that I raised as well spoke to the fact that there is also legislation that protects identifying the perpetrators of sex crimes. And that was done in part to protect victims that might have a relationship with the perpetrator. And certainly when you talk about child sex abuse, the vast majority of cases involve individuals that have a relationship with the victim, grandfathers, stepmothers, that sort of thing. The unintended consequence of that, however, is that the perpetrators are protected, and there's an added benefit, if you will, of them to go on and commit, ongoing crimes. So the suggestion that we have made, and certainly I know that the Women's Resource Centre and the Coalition for the Protection of Children are in favour of amending the legislation. It would actually be a very small amendment, allowing for victims or their families to determine whether or not they want the identity of the perpetrator to be made public. Exactly. So that was the second point to which I spoke to today.
And there was no response to that? No. Okay. In respect of other motions, in respect of other things that happened in the Senate.
That's right. You spoke to the historic change to the 60-40 rule.
Yes. This was legislation that was introduced by the government to change the 60-40 rule going forward in respect of various industries, to allow those that wanted to have foreign investment to make an application to the minister to have that foreign investment. And we support that legislation. We need to get a stimulus into the economy. Our concern really is just that we tread carefully in making sure that we are still watching out for the best interests of Bermuda business. Yes, they have to be listed on the Bermuda Stock Exchange, and yes, if amendments are made to that, it has to be brought to the House of Assembly by way of a negative resolution procedure, which essentially means you get notice and an opportunity to discuss the issue. But we have to tread carefully to make sure we're protecting the interests of Bermudians, period. I also spoke today in respect of the Bermuda Immigration Protection Act amendment, which you recall is to do with removing the restriction on non-Bermudians that are married to Bermudians to get a license to buy an interest in a Bermuda property. That legislation passed with the full support of the One Bermuda Alliance, but we made a number of very important points. This is a government reversal. They like to use the phrase revision, but it is a reversal of a policy that should never have been implemented in the first place. We supported the intent of the legislation to prevent fronting. We need to protect property for Bermudians.
Absolutely.
But it was discriminatory against Bermudians who happened to marry a non-Bermudian.
Right.
That then needed to go get a license and permission from the minister to buy that property. It was wrong then. It remains wrong, because if that Bermudian couple, that couple that were, one is Bermudian, one is non-Bermudian, wish to purchase a second property, they are still going to require a license.
Right.
So still a license provision for a
Right.
Bermudian who happens to be married to non-Bermudian.
Right.
The final point on this was that a code of practice was made mention of in the legislation today. That the code of practice will be followed by the minister in determining whether or not a license should be granted for that second purchase. Where's the code of practice?
Right.
We hear it's coming, but there was nothing today that showed us what that code of practice is or what it's going to be. That's an important point, so that practitioners, anyone that is buying it has an interest or wants to buy that piece of property, knows what those guidelines are.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's a bit of it's again, so it's taken too long. The problem was identified 5 years ago. It's taken 5 years to come to this, no doubt because of government infighting from within their own caucus group about why they did or did not need to make this amendment. A good day today, I think. Some important legislation was passed, but some of it was just too long in coming. And that seems to be the theme of this government.
Right, yeah, agreed.
Thank you.